Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. What if I told you that who picks up the check on your very first date is actually a more accurate predictor of your future net worth than your current salary?
I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's true.
Right. So today's mission is to completely decode the language of money. We're going to take the aggressive, old school common sense rules of wealth building and basically crash them headfirst into the highly nuanced modern realities of investing.
It is going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, we're exploring the mechanics of good debt versus bad debt, how to actually escape a stagnant career without ruining your life, the psychological trap of looking rich, and exactly how your romantic relationships act as this, ultimate financial multiplier. We are breaking down what it actually takes to win with money, step by step. And real quick before we dive in, if you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button.
You know, it really is quite a landscape we're navigating today. The contrast between our two source materials, it just provides this remarkably complete picture of financial literacy for you listening.
It really does. For this deep dive, our mission is extracting the most actionable wisdom from two very, very different perspectives. On one side, we have traditional finance expert Dave Ramsey, and he's delivering this fiery, tough love rant on the 5 universal rules of wealth.
Right. Very traditional.
Exactly. And on the other side, we have this deeply analytical interview between Jay Shetty and entrepreneur Cody Sanchez, who breaks down the modern financial landscape in what she calls the actual language of money.
But, before we start comparing, index funds to written budgets, we really need to establish the foundational theme that anchors both of these frameworks. If you are listening to this right now and trying to figure out your own financial path, you first have to understand that money itself is completely amoral.
Amoral meaning it simply lacks a conscience, right? It doesn't possess inherent goodness or evil.
Exactly. It is a mechanism. Think of it like a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a shelter to create something highly protective and valuable.
Yeah, or you can take that exact same hammer, swing it at a window, and just destroy something beautiful.
Right. And the hammer remains totally neutral in both of those scenarios. Money operates the exact same way. It is merely an accelerator. It just magnifies whatever intentions, disciplines, and, values are already present inside the person wielding it.
That sets the table perfectly, I think. Because before you can multiply your wealth, you have to respect the foundational rules of the game. Dave Ramsey, he comes out swinging with his 5 non-negotiables.
He really does not hold back.
No, he doesn't. He says you need a written budget, you need to get out of debt, you must live on less than you make, you have to save and invest, and finally you should be outrageously generous. He treats these concepts less like financial theories and more like basic physics.
Like gravity.
Exactly. It's the financial equivalent of a gravity. If you jump off a roof, gravity applies to you whether you personally agree with the concept of gravity or not.
And the delivery of those rules is where we really see his specific philosophy shine through. In the source material, Ramsey aggressively defends this traditional stance against his critics. He specifically targets what he refers to as, quote, liberal journalists or broke 26-year-old journalism students.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, who argue that people are trapped in poverty primarily because wages have remained stagnant against inflation.
He definitely does not hold back on that front.
He is quite pointed. And just to be completely clear to you listening, we are strictly reporting his perspective as it exists in the source text here, maintaining total neutrality. We aren't endorsing any political viewpoint from the right or the left.
Right. We're just looking at the framework.
Precisely.
So.
But analytically speaking, his politically charged language serves a very deliberate purpose in his overall framework. He uses that rhetoric to push a philosophy of radical personal responsibility. His core argument is that wages are only stagnant if you consciously choose to remain in a stagnant situation.
I see.
He insists that no politician or macroeconomic policy is going to swoop in and fix your personal budget, so you must take absolute control of your own controllables.
Okay, I understand the value of radical responsibility, but I have to push back on his framework just a bit because it is incredibly black and white.
How so?
Well, Ramsey argues that all debt is inherently bad, full stop. He essentially says giving your money to banks makes you stupid. But when we look at Cody Sanchez's perspective, she argues that understanding money is like speaking a foreign language.
By a totally different approach.
Exactly. And her very first vocabulary lesson is a total shock to that old school system. She states that debit cards are actually far worse for you than credit cards.
Which is such a direct contradiction. It really highlights the difference between merely surviving financially and actually building wealth. Cody explains that the ultra-wealthy, even someone like Warren Buffett, who famously warns retail investors against the dangers of personal leverage, they utilize what is known as good debt.
Let's actually break down the mechanics of that because, I mean, good debt sounds like an oxymoron to anyone raised on traditional financial advice.
It does, yeah. But think of good debt as renting money to buy a machine that prints more money. If you borrow $10,000 at a 5% interest rate to purchase, say, a commercial vending machine route that yields a 20% return.
The debt is entirely paying for itself.
Exactly. It pays for itself while generating a 15% net profit. You are using the bank's money to increase your own net worth. That is leverage. Bad debt, on the other hand, is borrowing that exact same $10,000 at a 20% interest rate to buy a depreciating asset.
Like a jet ski or a designer wardrobe or something.
Right, things that produce absolutely zero income.
So tying that back to the cards, a debit card is essentially paying in cash. It leaves no footprint. A credit score, then, is basically your financial passport, right?
That passport analogy is spot on.
Yeah, because if you don't get the stamps proving you've traveled safely through smaller debts like a credit card that you pay off every month, the financial system literally won't let you cross the border into buying a house or acquiring a business.
Exactly. Debit cards do not help you build that vital credit history, which is the absolute underpinning of wealth creation in the U.S. Furthermore, Cody highlights the massive mechanical difference in fraud protection.
Oh, this is huge.
It's critical. If a thief steals your debit card information, they are directly draining your actual cash flow. The money you need for rent tomorrow is just gone. The bank might eventually reimburse you, but in the short term, you are out of capital.
Right, you're just stuck waiting.
But with a credit card, you are transacting with the bank's money. If fraud occurs, it is usually resolved with like 2 clicks online and a new card in the mail, while your actual cash remains entirely untouched in your checking account.
So this means the basic rule of spending less than you earn is non-negotiable. But the specific tools you use to execute that plan require modern financial fluency, which naturally transitions us into the next major hurdle we face, which is earning power.
The income side of the equation.
Right. If your income is your greatest wealth-building tool, how do you actually increase it when it feels like you're trapped in a W-2 job where raises barely match inflation?
Ramsey uses a deeply visceral metaphor for this exact scenario. He says that staying in a bad job makes you like a stagnant pond.
Oof. Stagnant pond.
Yeah, and water that doesn't move inevitably grows scum on top. His advice is aggressively primal. He says, get out of the cave, kill something, and drag it home.
Wow. Okay, it's a very dramatic image. But Cody Sanchez provides a much more actionable, corporate framework for how to actually execute that hunt in a modern workplace. She divides the workforce into 2 distinct categories, freeloaders and fixers.
The freeloader is the employee standing in a boat that has just sprung a leak. They stare at the water rushing in and casually state, well, I didn't drill that hole, so it's not my department's job to fix it.
Classic.
Right. A fixer, conversely, grabs some putty and immediately starts bailing water. They recognize a fundamental truth of capitalism, which is wherever there is a massive, hairy problem, there is an opportunity for outsized profit.
She maps out this progression so beautifully. It is the transition from being an NPC, a non-playable character in a video game who just repeats the same pre-programmed lines, to becoming the main character who actually rewrites the script.
It's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah, she describes a career journey as moving from a bricklayer, someone who merely lays the single brick they are handed, to a builder who can manage the construction of the whole wall. Then you become the architect who designs the extension, all the way up to the city planner who orchestrates the entire ecosystem.
You are systematically increasing your market value by increasing the complexity and scope of the problems you are capable of solving.
But let's pause and look at the reality of this. Because a lot of people hear this advice, they hear, don't be stagnant and be the main character. And their immediate impulse is, well, does this mean I need to march into my boss's office, quit my corporate job today, and start a side hustle chasing my true passion?
And following that impulse is perhaps the ultimate trap of modern hustle culture. The data Cody shares on this is incredibly sobering. 90% of startups fail over a 5-year period.
90%.
Yes. However, the data also shows you have a 33% higher likelihood of your startup succeeding if you actually keep your day job while you build it.
Wait, really? A 33% statistical advantage just from keeping your W-2. That is massive.
The underlying biology and psychology explain exactly why. When you have a steady, reliable income, your nervous system is able to downregulate. You are not operating in a constant state of fight or flight.
Right, because you can still eat.
Exactly. If your side hustle doesn't make money month one, you can still pay your rent. This allows you to make rational, long-term business decisions rather than desperate, panic-driven choices just to keep the lights on. Cody also strongly warns against the danger of tying your personal passions directly to your profits.
This is where she introduces the boring, sexy matrix, isn't it?
Yes, the boring, sexy matrix. It turns out there is a massive inverse relationship between how sexy an industry appears on the outside and how much money the average person actually makes operating inside of it.
Like Hollywood.
Take Hollywood, for example. It is the quintessential, passion-driven, glamorous industry, yet the source material points out that over 80% of the actors in the Screen Actors Guild do not make enough money from acting to even qualify for the union's basic health insurance.
That is wild, 80%.
Because the baseline income is shockingly low. The massive supply of passionate people willing to work for pennies literally drives the wages down.
Meanwhile, someone operating a deeply unglamorous, boring business like a route of dusty vending machines or a local commercial laundromat, is quietly building massive, reliable cash flow.
Exactly.
It just highlights the crucial difference between a hobby and a scalable skill. You can absolutely love playing guitar on the weekends without needing to monetize it. Because, honestly, forcing it to pay your bills often just ruins the joy of playing guitar.
Decoupling your ego from your income stream is a major step in financial maturity. You learn to love the game of business by mastering the mechanics of business, not by forcing the free market to subsidize your weekend hobbies.
Okay, so you've kept your day job, you've downregulated your nervous system, you've become a fixer at work, and you are finally generating surplus cash. But having that new margin creates a brand new psychological danger. Suddenly, the urge to signal your new status kicks in.
Oh, absolutely.
What is the trap standing in the way of actually keeping that wealth?
The trap is the overwhelming, curated societal pressure to look rich rather than doing the quiet, invisible work required to actually be rich.
Ramsey screams about this constantly. He notes that actual millionaires don't act like fools, financing Ferraris at 12% interest just to impress strangers at stoplights.
And Cody backs that up with a staggering modern statistic regarding the Coachella Music Festival.
Oh, this blew my mind.
If you look at social media, you see influencers posting incredibly glamorous, carefree photos that portray an ultra-luxurious reality. But when you pull back the curtain on the finances, 64% of Coachella attendees are using buy now, pay later consumer debt plans just to afford the basic admission ticket.
64%. So they're literally trading years of high-interest consumer debt for a temporary 24-hour illusion of wealth on Instagram.
It's tragic, really. It illustrates how the desperation to signal success actively erodes your mechanical ability to achieve it.
I want to bring up the lipstick theory here, because when you look at how people cope with economic stress, it perfectly explains this kind of behavior.
It's a fascinating phenomenon.
Right. After the tragic events of 9/11, the markets crashed and the economy went into a tailspin. But the cosmetics company Estee Lauder noticed something incredibly counterintuitive.
What did they see?
While consumers completely stopped buying large macro luxuries they canceled European vacations and delayed buying new cars, the sales of premium, high-end lipstick actually spiked by 11%.
The psychology behind that is fascinating. When the macroeconomic environment feels heavy and out of control, humans pull back on massive investments, but overcompensate by purchasing micro-luxuries. A $40 lipstick or a $7 artisanal coffee provides an immediate, manageable hit of dopamine.
Yeah, it's just a coping mechanism to feel a momentary sense of abundance.
But if you want to truly build wealth during those downturns, you have to invert that psychology. You have to do what Warren Buffett suggests. Be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. Right now, Cody points out that mathematically, buying a home as an investment is actually a very poor decision for a lot of people.
Because of the interest rates.
Exactly. The math simply does not support the cultural narrative that a house is always your best investment. When you combine 5 to 8% interest rates with a 3 million home national shortage, you are buying into hyperinflated prices at maximum borrowing costs.
So what's the alternative?
Often, the much smarter mechanical move is to rent, aggressively negotiate your lease terms, and deploy your saved capital into better yielding opportunities.
Which brings us to the execution phase. How does a beginner actually deploy that capital? Cody breaks the intimidating world of investing down into 4 very clear progressive stages.
Stage 1 is fundamental invest in yourself. If your capital is low, spend it on acquiring new high-leverage skills. The return on investment for expanding your own capability is essentially uncapped.
That makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you have consistent margin, you graduate to stage 2, which is the S&P 500 and index funds. She recommends automating at least 10% of your income into low-cost, highly diversified funds like Vanguard. And the underlying mechanism for why you absolutely must do this is inflation.
Inflation is the silent killer of wealth.
It really is. Because if you took a $100 bill in the 1970s and hid it under your mattress, today, the actual purchasing power of that bill is only worth about $25.
That evaporation of cash is exactly why Stage 2 is mandatory.
Let's actually demystify how index funds protect against that evaporation. Because when you buy an S&P 500 index fund, you aren't trying to gamble on picking one winning stock.
No, not at all.
You are buying a microscopic slice of the 500 biggest, most profitable companies in America. So as inflation drives the prices of everyday goods up, those specific companies are the ones collecting the extra profit. You are essentially hitching your financial wagon to the very inflation that is killing your W-2 wage.
That captures the mechanism perfectly. Now, Stage 3 is where the mechanics become highly complex: private equity and alternative investments. This involves stepping outside the public stock market.
So not just buying stocks on an app.
Right. Instead of buying shares of a massive public entity, you are pooling capital to buy private companies. Perhaps a regional chain of car washes or a software startup restructuring their operations and eventually selling them. It requires deep liquidity and a profound understanding of market mechanics.
And finally, stage 4 is the ultimate wealth multiplier, buying and owning businesses outright.
The absolute pinnacle.
Yeah. And why is this the pinnacle?
Yeah.
Because you completely control the cash flow, the tax advantages, and the equity. You are no longer trading your limited time for a wage. You own the very system that generates the wealth.
It is the shift from being a player in the game to owning the board itself.
But here's the crazy part. You can follow Ramsey's budget to the letter, you can automate your 10% into Vanguard, and you could be the ultimate fixer at work. But both of our sources reveal a massive wild card that dictates your net worth more heavily than almost any technical financial decision you will ever make.
Yes, the person you choose to date and eventually marry.
It is the ultimate hidden wealth multiplier.
The statistics surrounding marriage and wealth are just staggering. Over the course of their careers, married couples make, on average, 30% more income than their single counterparts. Furthermore, their total net worth is nearly 3 times higher.
3 times higher. Let's unpack the why behind that, because it isn't just about splitting the rent, is it?
No, it fundamentally comes down to emotional stability and complementary focus. When you choose a partner who plays a complementary game, perhaps one partner is the visionary entrepreneur taking calculated career risks, while the other provides grounded logistical stability and manages the investment portfolio, it creates an incredibly resilient foundation.
That makes a lot of sense.
It drastically reduces the sheer mental and financial bandwidth wasted on the friction of the modern dating market.
Oh, speaking of that friction, the sources dive right into the incredibly awkward reality of modern dating and money. They tackle the classic, deeply contested question, who pays on the first date?
It is a massive cultural pain point right now.
It really is. Both Jay Shetty and Cody agree on a beautifully simple rule. The person who initiates and asks for the date should be the one who pays for it.
Which seems fair.
Yeah, but they also acknowledge the profound shifts in gender dynamics and income distribution over the last few generations. Men and women are now actively competing for the same jobs, the same educational spots, and the same cultural relevancy in a way that is historically unprecedented.
And that unprecedented dynamic creates a ton of ego and quiet resentment around the dinner bill. Cody offers a brilliant psychological framework for navigating those tense moments. She asks the listener, do you want to be right or do you want to win?
Oh, I love that. Do you want to be right or do you want to win?
It is a vital reframe. You might feel you are technically right that society dictates the bill should be split equally because we strive for equal partnership. But if enforcing that rigid rightness over a $60 dinner alienates a partner you genuinely connect with, you lose the much bigger game of finding a complementary teammate.
Yeah, you win the battle but lose the war.
Exactly. It requires vulnerability and grace to navigate these moments, rather than just pointing fingers at what is technically fair on paper.
Which naturally leads us to the most controversial financial document in any romance, the prenup. A significant portion of the population views asking for a prenup as this deeply pessimistic, toxic expectation that the marriage is going to fail before the ink on the license is even dry.
I mean, it's understandable why people feel that way, but if we look at it entirely through the lens of the language of money, a prenup is actually the ultimate tool for marital success.
How so?
It acts as a forcing function. It forces a couple to sit down across from each other and have a highly uncomfortable, deeply revealing conversation about their core values, their hidden debts, their trust levels, and exactly how they handle conflict before they legally merge their lives.
The psychological weight of that conversation is the whole point. It isn't actually about the money or who gets the couch. Your joint bank account is just a numerical reflection of your willingness to have difficult, transparent conversations with your partner. If you cannot negotiate the terms of a prenup without the relationship breaking down into bitter resentment, you are likely going to struggle immensely with the complex financial realities of building a decades-long life together.
The process clarifies expectations, and clear expectations are the absolute bedrock of any successful partnership, whether it is romantic or commercial.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from Dave Ramsey's tough love grandmother advice about writing a budget and destroying your bad debt, to Cody Sanchez's sophisticated strategies for leveraging good credit, leveling up your career from an NPC to a city planner, and having those brutally hard financial conversations in your romantic relationships.
The synthesis of these contrasting viewpoints is just incredibly powerful.
Yeah, because the ultimate goal here isn't just to hoard a giant pile of cash so you can finance a flashy car and post it on social media. It is about waking up, refusing to be stagnant, and taking radical control of the variables you can actually influence. You have to learn and respect the mechanical rules of the financial game, the physics of it, so that eventually you have the total freedom to play the game entirely on your own terms.
And as you embark on that journey, there's a final, broader implication to consider. We've spent this time talking entirely about how you build wealth for yourself. But if you successfully apply this language of money, a new, much more complex challenge emerges. What happens next? If money is merely an amoral accelerator, how do you teach this language to the next generation without stripping away their hunger? How do you ensure your children grow up to be fixers when they are born into the safety and abundance of the city you have already built for them?